In this chapter, we're going to dive into a really fascinating real-world data science case study, all about air quality. We'll follow the journey of how data scientists tackled a critical public health challenge, wading through messy, real-world data to build a solution that actually helps protect millions of people. It's a perfect example of how we can turn raw information into life-saving insight.
So, where does a problem like this even start? Well, often it's with a massive environmental event, just like the huge California wildfires back in 2020. I mean, when smoke literally blankets an entire state, people have an urgent need for reliable information. Is it safe to go outside? And that's not just about comfort, right? It's a critical public health question. Getting access to timely and, more importantly, accurate air quality data helps people decide what to do. Now, to get this vital information, we basically rely on two main types of sensors, but they bring us to a classic data trade-off. On one hand, you have the government's air quality system, or AQS. These things are the gold standard, incredibly accurate, totally reliable. The big downside? They're super expensive, so there aren't many of them, and they only report data once an hour, often with a lag. Then, on the other hand, you have consumer-grade sensors, like the ones from PurpleAir. These are cheap, so thousands of people have them, creating this dense, real-time network. The catch? Well, they're not as accurate. In fact, they're known to consistently overestimate how much pollution is in the air. So we're stuck with this choice: accurate but slow, or timely but biased. And this brings us right to the central question of our case study. A data scientist looks at this whole situation and asks, wait a minute, can we combine the best of both worlds? Is it actually possible to use that small, super accurate data set from the government sensors to clean up and correct the huge real-time data set from the PurpleAir network? The potential here is massive, using a little bit of high-quality data to make a much larger, lower-quality data set incredibly useful. So, to figure this out, we're going to walk through the entire data science lifecycle. We'll start with the problem itself, then find and pair up the different sensors, untangle all the messy raw data, connect the dots with some analysis, and finally, build the correction model that brings it all together. All right, our investigation kicks off with a really critical first step: geography. Before we can even think about comparing measurements, we have to be absolutely certain the sensors are measuring the same air. So our first job is to find pairs of AQS and PurpleAir sensors that are physically located right next to each other. This whole idea is called co-location. The goal is to find sensor pairs that are, for all practical purposes, side by side. In this case, the cutoff was 50 meters. And you can see why this is so important, right? It lets us control for the environment. If we compare a government sensor in a quiet park to a consumer sensor next to a busy highway, of course their readings will be different. By co-locating them, we can be pretty confident that any regular difference in their readings is because of the instruments themselves, not their location. We're comparing the sensors, not their surroundings. Of course, finding these pairs wasn't as simple as just looking at a map. When you dig into the raw data for the sensor locations, you immediately run into challenges. For example, the AQS site list had over 1,300 rows, but only 921 unique sites. Turns out, a single site could have multiple instruments, so that had to be cleaned up first. And meanwhile, the PurpleAir data was just enormous, with over 23,000 sensors to deal with. So, after cleaning and consolidating all that location data, the researchers performed what's known as a spatial join. You can think of it like a database query that matches records based on how close they are geographically. This powerful process sifted through thousands of locations and, bam, it identified 149 pairs of co-located AQS and PurpleAir sensors across the country. This refined set of 149 pairs became the heart of the entire study. Okay, so we found our sensor pairs. Now we have to move on to the next phase, dealing with the actual measurement data they produce. And this is where the real data wrangling begins. As you're about to see, raw data is pretty much never as clean as you'd hope. So when you first plot the number of readings per day from a single PurpleAir sensor, you get, well, this. It's a bit of a mess. A sensor that's working right should be taking a consistent number of measurements each day, which would look like a nice flat line. This chart, with its weird steps and huge spikes, it's telling us something is definitely off. But these patterns aren't just random noise. Each one is actually a clue. There are specific real-world reasons for these inconsistencies. So our data cleaning task really becomes a kind of detective story. What happened to cause these strange patterns in the data? And by digging into the documentation and looking really closely at the data files, the puzzles were solved.
That big step down in the middle of the chart, that happened in May 2019 when PurpleAir updated its sensors to record data every 120 seconds instead of every 80. And those huge spikes where the readings suddenly doubled, those were just duplicated timestamps in the raw data. On top of all that, everything had to be converted from the universal UTC time zone to the local time zone to match up with the government data.
And here is the result of all that detective work. After removing the duplicates and accounting for that change in sampling rate, the plot looks so much better. Now we see two clear, stable periods, one where the sensor is correctly logging about 1,080 readings a day, and a second after the change where it's logging 720 a day. Now this is the kind of predictable behavior that tells us we have data we can finally trust. Okay, with properly cleaned and validated data for both types of sensors, we can finally move on to the fun part, exploratory data analysis. This is where we start visualizing the data and hunting for a meaningful and hopefully predictable relationship between the AQS and PurpleAir measurements. A great place to start is just by looking at the distributions of the readings. On the left, we've got the AQS readings, and on the right, the PurpleAir readings. They both have a similar shape, right? They're skewed to the right, which is pretty common for this kind of data. But look closer. The entire PurpleAir histogram is clearly shifted to the right. This is our first visual clue that PurpleAir sensors are systematically reporting higher values. A time series plot confirms this perfectly. Here we're looking at the weekly averages from one sensor pair. The solid line is the accurate AQS sensor, and the dotted line is the PurpleAir sensor. It's totally obvious that while the PurpleAir sensor is always reading higher, it tracks the peaks and valleys of the AQS sensor almost perfectly. They're telling the same story about air quality trends, just on a different scale. And this scatter plot, this is really the aha moment of the entire analysis. Each little dot represents a measurement from one of our co-located pairs. On the horizontal axis, you've got the true AQS reading, and on the vertical, the PurpleAir reading. And the pattern is just undeniable. There's a strong, positive, and remarkably straight-line relationship between the two. This is exactly the kind of predictable connection we were hoping to find. And what's really important is that this relationship isn't just something we can see, it's statistically strong. The correlation coefficient, which measures the strength of a linear relationship, is 0.88. Now, a perfect correlation is 1.0, so 0.88 is incredibly high. This statistical confidence is what gives us the green light to go ahead and build a predictive model. So, because we found this strong, predictable relationship, we can finally move on to the last step in our journey. Building a mathematical model that can take a raw PurpleAir reading and correct it to be much closer to the true value. We're turning our insight into a practical, real-world solution. The technique we use for this is called a calibration model, and the analogy of a bathroom scale is perfect. Imagine you know your scale at home is a little bit off. To fix it, you could put some known precise weights on it, say 10, 20, and 50 kilograms, and just write down what your scale says. By figuring out the relationship between the true weight and what your scale measures, you can then correct for it every time. In our case, the super accurate AQS readings are our precise weights, and the PurpleAir sensor is our slightly off bathroom scale that we want to calibrate. Now, a simple linear model worked pretty well, but the EPA researchers found they could make it even more accurate. They discovered that the PurpleAir sensor's error was also related to the moisture in the air. This is likely because humidity can affect the size of the tiny particles the sensor is trying to detect. So the best model ended up using two variables, the raw PurpleAir reading and the relative humidity, which the sensor also happens to record. And this is the final result, the correction formula itself. This simple, practical equation is the culmination of all that data wrangling and analysis. It's incredibly easy to use. You take any raw PurpleAir reading, that's the PA variable, and its matching relative humidity, RH, you plug them in, and the number that comes out is a prediction that very closely matches what a gold standard AQS sensor would have reported. And the impact of this work is huge. I mean, this isn't just a theoretical exercise. This exact correction formula is now being used by the US government on its official AirNow fire and smoke map. This means that data from thousands of those low-cost PurpleAir sensors, once it's corrected, is now integrated into the official maps that millions of people rely on for timely, life-saving information. It's a perfect example of data science in action for the public good. So, in summary, this case study is a powerful demonstration of how different data sources can be combined to create something far more valuable than either one could be alone. We saw how a small, accurate government data set could be used to calibrate and unlock the massive potential of a real-time crowdsourced network. The journey took us from messy, raw data all the way to a simple formula that now directly impacts public safety. And this leaves us with a final thought. This basic idea of using a ground truth to correct a larger, noisier dataset can be applied in so many other fields. What other kinds of citizen science or crowdsourced data are out there just waiting for the right analysis to transform them into powerful new tools for understanding our world?